welcome, Nikki Eisenhauer. Thank you so much for sitting with me. It's
You're so
really lovely to
welcome.
have you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for asking me. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm enjoying the fact that our colors are matching. I
That's
see
right. We have that in common.
you've got a colorful background with plants, and I've got a house full of plants. So I think we've got something in common. All right. I actually persuaded you to come and answer some questions for me and give some information to my community. The topic of narcissism and narcissistic injury is growing, and everything that I've heard, the idea that narcissism is spreading globally at this time really seems to be a factor. And I've got more clients coming to me for help than I've ever had before. I know that you have done years of work. You are a professional psychotherapist, a coach. You also run a podcast show called, I think it's called Emotional Badass. That's an American term. All right. You advise people and you teach people about emotional injury, including narcissism.
Mhm.
So I felt it would be valuable if you could share with us, please, beginning with your professional life, where you began to work with that. I think you worked in the mainstream first, and then you started branching out a bit
Mhm.
like I did. So
Mhm.
let's hear a little bit about your story first, and then we can go on to the topic of narcissism after that.
Okay. Well, I grew up going to a lot of therapy, actually. So I had therapists since I was a small child in school and in college interns. So it was something that was familiar to me. I started my career. I was in graduate school. I'm from New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. And so that really informed the beginning of my career. I went back to New Orleans. So I call it like a baptism under fire to start the profession. And I was working in addiction and I was working in dual diagnosis. And what I started realizing was so many people in addiction actually had personality disordered parents. And
Right.
I started seeing that if we attended to that emotional wounding and gave them skills, what happened to a lot of them, not all of them, was their addictive tendencies sort of naturally went down because they had more soothing, more understanding. So that was a big informer of my career. My other specialties became grief. Being from New Orleans, we celebrate grief a little differently. And I think grief with narcissistic injury is not often talked about.
No, it isn't.
So I saw that as a big giant connector. And then my other specialties, addiction, of course. So I saw that link. And so grief and loss, addiction, and then highly sensitive people. And that was the specialty that I didn't sort of intend, like the other ones, like were sort of more concrete to me, but I started realizing there are themes with the people who want to work with me and the ones that I resonate with the most and can be the most effective with. And it wasn't until years later that I heard the term highly sensitive person and have gotten into Dr. Elaine Aron's work to understand, oh, our nervous systems are also different when we're highly sensitive. And it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing. Was I born with that? Does the narcissistic parenting make it worse? And I think it's both. I think I'm born with it. I think a lot of people are born with it. And then if we're in these family systems where we can't get our emotional needs met, it's as if some of us go, oh, I'll be the emotional everything in this family because there's so much not happening emotionally in this family. So I think there's a lot with my specialties that I just see how all these things interweave and that it's not one thing, it's all of these things. And there's a lot of implication to that.
Well, now this term highly emotional people or emotionally sensitive people is something, again, like you, I only learned in later years, and I've never really been quite sure what it is. Could you describe
Okay.
a highly sensitive person?
Yes, yes. So the way I would explain a highly sensitive person is that science is starting to prove that we likely have more mirror neurons. So we are the people in the world that when we go into an environment, our sensory systems are taking in a ton of information. You're wearing glasses. If you or I stood, I live and I have got a beautiful mountain view in the Rocky Mountains, but if you and I stood next to one another and I said, oh, I can't see the view, I can't see the mountains. And you said, oh, well, I can because I have my glasses on. We have such a comfort in knowing that we have different visual abilities. Nobody's ego gets wrapped up in that. We just go, oh, of course, you see better than I do, right? Or the other one sees better and somebody sees less. Our egos are wrapped up in emotionality. So when we say, oh, someone has more sensitivity or I'm more emotional, we have a whole world of feeling and ego issue with that. But with our other senses, we understand. Some people hear better, some people have loss of hearing. We understand that we have differences within the population, but when it comes to our emotionality, how we take in through our senses what we see, like my system takes in more visual information, which is tiring. That takes energy, and it's something that we don't understand. Yes. I hear more, I sense things. So we're sort of moving through our sensory systems, processing so much information. It's why we get easily overwhelmed. It's why we get easily burnt out. We get overstimulated. It's also why we tend to have a lot of, ADD. Like, it's not just the phones in our pockets, but if I'm observing so much, then I'm getting distracted. So there's a lot of implication to this too. Now, an empath would be like a highly sensitive person, like 2.0. That's sort of I would say I'm an empath. That's not just my sensory system, sight, sound, touch, feel. It's my emotional system also feels other people's emotions. So I am very almost clairvoyant. I often know what someone's thinking or feeling from being a therapist for 19 years. At first, I would think about a client and I'd think, oh, maybe I should check in on them. I haven't heard from them in a while. And then they'd book an appointment. And that happened so frequently for me that I had to really say, okay, it's kind of on the border of psychic. Someone said to me once, it's the gift of prophecy. I have more of a comfort with that than psychic. But I do, we can see, the way I put it to people is, we can see the potential dominoes that are lining up and how they're going to fall, because we sense also into the future, which is useful and also not useful, and connects to anxiety. So there's a lot to understand about this as a temperament, as a personality type, in terms of how is that to relate to other people. We tend to not feel understood. We're the people that grow up hearing, why are you crying? Why are you getting so intense about that? So we get very invalidated. We don't know really how to hold our emotionality. So there's a lot with highly sensitive people.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I'm so glad I've heard a lot more from you. And clearly, you're speaking from personal experience, and you've also had a lot of experience working with others. I've kind of avoided that title a little bit.
Okay.
Because, I come from mainstream medicine where it doesn't even understand or talk about trauma, let alone highly sensitive people. So I'm a little way behind on getting, educated in all of this. Okay, thank you for that. That's really fascinating. So it's a personality, an emotional type.
We're deep. Yeah. It's the deeper people in the world. We just sort of experience the world more deeply, more fully. And that's both beautiful, but we also need to understand as practitioners the difference between me having high highs and low lows versus bipolar. So a lot of highly sensitive people will say, like, are you sure I'm not just bipolar? And so it takes a lot of nuance and understanding to not pathologize. What I now understand is a gift in me, but I have to learn how to use it like a car, right? It's like 10 and 2 and looking. It's hard to learn how to drive at first. Now it's old hat to all of us, but that's kind of similar to how I guide sensitive people in starting to understand themselves. They have to sort of learn how to drive the emotionality that they have and steer towards what will help them stay grounded and calm and not make decisions from a overstimulated, over emotional place. So there's a lot there.
So that's absolutely fascinating, because my interest, I think, coming perhaps from mainstream medicine and now working with trauma, I put everything through the lens of where the autonomic nervous system sits in terms of whether it's switched on to a very high degree in fight and flight, or sometimes people are even frozen and disconnected from their emotions. And my journey that I give people in healing from trauma is to come back to a grounded place. But what I wasn't factoring into this is that people might be highly sensitive anyway. And so when they're in trauma, they're even more sensitive and more traumatized. And when they get back to a grounded place, they still remain highly sensitive. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. I will never not be highly sensitive,
Right.
ever, no matter how much work that I do. So it's about how do I manage that and keep it a positive tool for me. And I have to have a lot of understanding. A lot of sensitive people want to turn it off. They want to be normal like everybody else because it takes a lot of energy. We process more. So there's a lot of sort of making peace with how we are. There are professionals that believe trauma is 100% responsible for high sensitivity. I don't believe that because I've had such a long career. I've watched so many highly emotional people have children, and I can see they're not traumatized and they're born just observing more. They tend to have a lot of creativity. They tend to connect with children and animals in a very deep way because they feel safe to children and animals because of their depth. So,
Beautiful,
and
beautiful.
I also believe, not just in my own story, but in the hundreds, if not thousands of clients I've had at this point, that the children of narcissism, it heightens our sensitivity because we're learning how to pay attention. Now, not just narcissism, let's say mom or dad's an alcoholic. You learn to be hyper aware and super observant to try to protect yourself. So if you're already sensitive, you're good at that. You do more of that. It grows your sensitivity. It's why going into a crowd is so difficult because you're sensing everybody and everything. And so we have to figure out how to keep this a gift inside of us and how to block some things so
Right.
that we can go into environments that are very overstimulating.
Okay. So you are by nature highly sensitive. You've also had a history, I know, in your own story of having had traumatic injury from narcissistic parenting. And we've certainly done some work together. It's still early days, but I think it would be really helpful for my community to learn a little bit about narcissistic injury from your perspective. You know it from many perspectives, including the hypersensitivity. Would you be willing to share some of your story and tell people a
Yes,
little bit?
yes. And I am an open book, just for anyone in your community listening. I talk about my story on my show. It feels like a spiritual calling to me about why I've gone through so much, is that I can give back in this way. So I do have a lot of comfort in talking about this stuff. So I was an unwanted child. I was an accidental pregnancy. My mother was 17 and young, and my mother had been born with a disability. Now it's easy to fix. It was hard to fix back then. So my mother didn't walk till she was 6. She had multiple surgeries. There's a lot of understanding why she developed some of the personality disorder traits she did, but also her parents, my grandparents, would acknowledge to me that she was just born differently. So I do think that her stuff was from birth too. She might not have been touched enough in the hospital. I think she didn't really know how to touch me. But when she was pregnant with me, her mother wanted me to be given up for adoption. So there was lots of fighting, lots of strife. They were forced to marry each other by conservative families, and they were volatile with each other. I don't know if I was the product of a one-night stand. I don't know if they ever had a love story. I don't know if there was any positive feeling in there at all.
Right.
And then I was born a month early in 1980, when today that's no big deal. Back then that was still very iffy. They gave me Catholic last rites. They thought I was going to die. They prepared my family for me to go. And then I just kept surviving. And so in those next few years of my life, I don't know how many times my heart stopped, my breathing stopped, and my mother had to resuscitate me. I'm the eldest. Then I had 2 younger siblings born when I was 3 and then when I was 5. My mother was a heavy smoker. Because she's narcissistic, she will swear up and down she didn't smoke during her pregnancies. We had every symptom of someone who smokes being born. So definitely she smoked. And so my sisters also had monitors for a couple of years after they were born. So the first very precious years of my life, other than what happened to me, was I was 3 to 6. when my sister's monitors would go off, heart monitors and breathing monitors, and I would watch my mom try to resuscitate them. So I would watch the babies flail and, for all intents and purposes, die and then be brought back. So I had a lot of very scary early childhood trauma while I lived in a nice house, and my dad worked for his father, so he made enough money. Then they divorced very volatilely. It was a leaving in the middle of the night. He smashed all of our things. My mother created stories about him. Before I was 7, one of the stories was from my mother's mouth to me was that my father was going to kidnap me and my sisters. And my father's Italian, fluent in Italian, bring us to Italy, leave us for dead, and I would never see anyone that I loved ever again. And she would say this to me every couple of days, and then she would tell me, and I am responsible for my sisters. So the amount of responsibility that was put on my shoulders when my father, I would say my father is also narcissistic, my biological father, but kind of classically is what I would say, and sort of simply. My mother is narcissistic. And when I say narcissistic, I am so less concerned with diagnostic criteria. And I am more concerned with these 3 things: low maturity, low insight, low personal responsibility. When there's low maturity, there's also low responsibility, and there's low empathy. So 4 things.
Yes.
Okay? The combination of those things make a childhood feel very unsafe. And if you're a smart intellectually and then smart emotionally child in that family system, that's, I think, an extra special hellscape to grow up under adults that don't have much more maturity than about 12 to 16 years old.
Wow. Wow. I've not heard that as a description of narcissism. You know, as you probably well aware, the classic one is certainly the one that I try and look at is, you know, the inability to have emotions, to only be able to function intellectually or function with your mind and not with your heart and various other things. But I really like that category of 4 things that you've just cited there.
It's a difference between what I think of as male versus female presentation. You know, and when we say male narcissist, we have that typical sort of bombastic businessman, kind of all about me, I'm king of the castle type of archetypal idea. We don't have such an archetypal idea about female narcissism. Female narcissism is more martyrdom. It's more all about me. I'm the victim of everything. I say this about narcissists. They are the victim of everything and they are responsible for nothing.
That's a good quote. I love it. The victim of everything and responsible for nothing.
For nothing. That's why they point outwardly and blame everything. So when you're the child, every upset feeling, and my mother was my fault because she told me it was. She told me with her body language, she told me with the way she looked at me, and she told me directly. So that's part of what gives the child of that so much responsibility. If you add the being the eldest, which a lot of my clients are the eldest, that those are the children that really get the weight of the world. Or I see someone who takes on the role of being more of the eldest, even if they're not, because the other siblings are just in whatever dysfunction they're in. So I had a lot of terror as a little girl. There were times when my parents would be physical, you know, but that was confusing for me as a young woman too, because again, we have the archetype of the little woman who's getting beaten by the bad man, but that wasn't what I saw. I watched my mother goad him continuously into hitting her in a way that was highly manipulative and highly dysfunctional. And she would be violent with him. Then I'd watch him try to hold her back. And it wasn't really coming from him, though he didn't participate in the healthiest of ways either. You know, so I had a lot of sort of flip-flopped typical gender dynamics too, growing up. There were times like when I was 5 to 6 years old where I would take my 3-year-old and newborn sisters down the block where my aunt lived. And my mom would call and basically say, we're having a hard time. And I'd leave the house and walk them to meet my cousin's mother. And that was just part of it. That was just part of it. There were times when guns were pulled, like we had a gun family, it's an American thing, and there was lots of terror. So if we look at my nervous system from birth, in my entire childhood, I was absolutely on guard and activated. There, even for things that are not traumatic, like watching American football. And big football fans in Louisiana. I can remember being 4 and 5 years old, and I'd sit at the back and I'd watch my big extended family would get together, and I'd just observe them. I'd watch them watching football, because for me, that was the most emotion I saw come out of any of my family members. Somebody would score and it would be like, oh, yeah. I'd watch as a little girl and not have these thoughts formed yet, but I was certainly observing, and in reflection, I've been able to form the thoughts that I was fascinated that something about this sport made them emote, but they didn't emote for me. If they got angry, that was high emotion. But other than anger, there wasn't a lot of emotion, but I felt a lot of emotion. So much messaging and stop crying. I heard a lot, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about, which encourages you to go inward. The tension you feel in your body just sort of doesn't have anywhere to go. So it just becomes like very frenetic in your system. And then sensitive people wonder, why am I so tired? Why am I I could sit in one spot and not move, accomplish nothing in a day. But if my internal energy is just sort of bouncing around in me, because I've been taught it's not allowed to come out in any way, or I'll be shamed if it does. It's almost like we create our own hell without knowing that we're creating it, because we're just trying to survive and not get any more ridicule or shame. Or even to feel other than is quite profound in a family. So, trauma is so overused and so watered down in this day and age. Yes, the traumatic things that are sort of obvious, like when I was a little bit older, I was sexually abused by the man my mother would go on to marry. I'll say more about that in a minute. Those are the things that I think traditional professionals, they pick up on and they check the box and they go, oh yeah, well, this is definitely something you need to work on. And of course, but for me and a lot of the clients that I've had, it really does become less about those big things and more about that energy of fear or constant tension from having an unsafe, low emotionality parent that can't ever really look at you and go, oh, honey, you look really stressed right now. Come on, come get on my lap. I've got you. Everything is okay. It's my job to worry about these things, not yours. To have a whole development without getting any message like that is quite the thing.
It certainly is. I mean, the way that you describe it from a personal perspective and a professional perspective is really quite incredible. It's going to be so amazing for people. It's so much better than reading in a book. I bought this book here, Dr. Ramani Divasala.
Yes. What I get told online is that I sound like Dr. Ramani, but I'm easier to relate to and more emotional. Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. I've watched her quite a bit, and I didn't find it easy to read. I found there was too much information and I was struggling with it. What I'm enjoying so much with you is how precise and accurate and descriptive you are of a condition that is very hard to understand and to manage when you're trying to help as a professional like myself. Yeah, really quite incredible. So I suppose the next question anybody would want to know is, can you really heal from this? It sounds like an impossible situation where there isn't a moment's reprieve, where you're always in the same situation. You're highly sensitive, so your nervous system is being bombarded all the time. You're trying to survive, and you're trying to help others to survive, generally speaking. I know I did with younger siblings as well. Can one ever recover?
Absolutely. But it is a very long road, and it is something that will be with me all of my life. I mean, the really sad piece of it is that it shaped me. Like whatever is happening to us while we developed it shaped us. It really, really did. And so we have to work with that shape. And I think we're very malleable in a lot of ways, but we have to understand a lot of the messaging that we got so that we actively and intentionally change that messaging. And that is so much more nuanced than you will ever read in any book. It's part of why I started a show, because this stuff has got to be learned person to person. I think we've really lost sort of a sitting around the fire, passing down wisdom, piece of humanity that I think it's one of the gifts that I think I have in the world is that I see what's missing. And I've always seen what's missing. And I didn't realize that other people didn't see what was missing, but I see what's missing and I try to fill it in. And I think we're missing that. And I don't think you can learn about what these human personalities do to each other in a scientific way. I think there are limits to how we can study emotion, relating, energies, even communication, because there's so much more communication than words. And we have to help people. We have to, if we are their helpers and healers, we have to help them bear witness to what actually really happened to them. One of my theories, the way I describe it, is that in a family system that has narcissism in it, okay, and mine has multiple players with narcissism in it, which is hard to fathom, because you would think if they got together, they just sort of eat each other, but they don't. They sort of complement. There's often an overt narcissist and a covert narcissist in relationship parenting children.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
So in that, I believe that there's a responsibility that belongs to those parents, and I see it as a beach ball, big beach ball. And those parents are not going to touch that beach ball of responsibility. And here comes a highly sensitive child, okay, that just sort of looks around and goes, oh, just like if I threw a ball to you right now, you'd have the instinct to just catch it because it was thrown to you. That child comes into the system and goes, I know what I'll do. I'll catch it. And so we just sort of, that's how we become people pleasers. It's how we become what I call performance-based self-worth. That's part of what saved me. I got good grades in school. I got A's. They tested me for gifted. It was teachers that saw me and would tell me I'm special, or the way that I think is really unique, and that's good. I didn't get those messages elsewhere. So I got a lot of spiritual mothers to reparent me through teachers, through therapists, through spiritual fathers too. But it's that beach ball of responsibility. So part of our healing is learning we need to learn how to be responsible for ourselves, and we have to let other people be responsible for themselves. So the two things I teach on its face, I have coursework and all that, are peace and boundaries. Peace and boundaries. And most people confuse boundaries in terms of, I'm going to tell this other person this is my line and they shouldn't cross it. And that didn't ever work for me, because my family members would look me dead in the eye and step right over the boundary I tried to step and go, now what are you going to do about it? And so I teach people how to really have empowered boundaries that they can really affect, enact, and carry through with, that have nothing to do with trying to control somebody else. Because if you really need boundaries work with your family members, it's because they're boundary crossers. With other people, we don't need to establish our boundaries so hard unless somebody is pushing. When someone's highly conscientious, they're aware that you're going to have some natural boundaries. Personality disordered people, that's almost how they relate to people, is if they sense any boundary at all, if they do, they're going to cross it. That's what the personality disorder functionally actually is for the rest of us, pushing into all of us. That's why we need boundaries, and we need to be savvy about manipulation. We really, really do. We need a lot of permission to critically think. A lot of sensitive people are very kind people. So they have confusion between judgment and discernment. And if we are to heal, we have to give ourselves a lot of permission to have discernment about people. And then we have to be empowered to decide, where are we putting them in the theater of our life? You can't put a narcissist on the first 3 rows of your theater and think, this is going to be okay. You can try them out at the 10th row. You can try them out at the 20th row. Sometimes you got to let them stand up at the back of the theater, and sometimes you got to kick them out. But they will not work in the first few rows. And if you try, you will have chaos and you will have exhaustion. And you, in my opinion, you will be acting in great disrespect of yourself.
So the advice that you're giving this way is incredibly valuable. Can people get this from you by coming to your podcast? How can people learn more?
I mean, that's why I did it. My clients would tell me, you should have a show, like leaving my office when I had a traditional office.
Right.
You could help so many people. Just come listen. And part of why I did the show is because, we go to talk therapy, traditional talk therapy, which we need. There's a time, a place, an absolute rightness to just have to talk things out. Absolutely. But there's limits to that. And we're so heady in this day and age where we just Google everything. It's like another thought, another bit of information, the healing is not in information.
Yeah.
We have to figure out that space of how do we apply this knowledge. So a lot of what I do, because I've spent so much time on the other side of that chair, and a sad truth is that most therapists have not. So when you sat on the other side of that chair so much, you really get a sense of what you actually need to move your life forward. And what we need is more how. And as long as it's heady up here, like we're all almost like information addicted. So the way I put it a lot is I help people get their body to feel what their mind knows. And that's the struggle. Most people who get to the place of working with you or working with me, they're going to have so much healing knowledge, but they're missing the piece about how to apply it. And the way that we learn as humans is not by reading it in a book. We learn by seeing another human do it or talk through it. That's why I show myself. So you can come to the podcast and you can listen. I have people tell me, oh my goodness, when they hear something that resonates with them, it's not just oh, that's an interesting bit of information. Their body goes, whoa, this is something important. So your body, your intuition knows when there's something important. And when you listen to my show and that happens, that's something to sit with again. So I have people tell me, I listened to that episode 5 times and I took notes. And I'm like, okay, and then how are you applying it? So I have created tons of different ways to work with me. I have a Patreon. Somebody can spend $5 or $10 and interact with me. I have a monthly Q&A in there at a $10 a month level. So it's been really important to me, coming from tremendous poverty myself, to have options where people can get real connection. I think that's where the healing is. Because when you see me do something or hear me say, this is how I worked through it, do this, don't do this, it is such an encourager instead of just the heady knowledge of, I'm a professor and I have lots of factoids that are really great because science. That's not where the healing is, y'all. No matter how fascinating science is, you have to do it. So the concept I teach is emotional strength training, absolute emotional strength training. And the work you do comes in to help in terms of our neurology, actually quiet the nervous system. The combination of what I do and you do, I think, is what healing actually is. And people who have, I think, less, I have so much stress in terms of continuation of stress, kind of daily, really from birth all the way through my early 30s. I'll be 45 this year. So that's a lot. Most people don't have that much, thank goodness. So I think if you have more of a sort of typical handful of hard things in your life, healing your nervous system is as hard as it is, it's an easier beast to wrangle. If you have one of those lives where every single day you were hypervigilant and you didn't have reprieves of safety, security, people who could go, I see you, I feel you, that was wrong, or wow, your mom was really harsh. Then we got some relief in there that informed our systems that relief was allowed.
Yeah.
That's been kind of the crux of my healing, is that I didn't have any lowered cortisol times in my life. So my system as a pattern knows how to be amplified, on, ready. No matter how much head knowledge I have, it's taken my work with QEC to lower my system into being able to feel grounded and integrated more than what understanding or practice can.
You're absolutely right. I'm seeing quite a lovely partnership here, because what I haven't got the time, interest, or age for anymore is all the in-between stuff.
Yep.
How do you apply what you've learned? How do you apply the healing you've had? You know, I've gone straight for the core healing with QEC by healing at the subconscious mind, all the traumas, the specific traumas from being carried in the womb by a narcissistic mother all the way to the present time, and letting those go by changing the wiring in the brain. Now, while that relieves an immense amount of the core stuff, what hasn't gone are all the little in-between bits of everyday, you know, uncertainties, everyday people pleasing, or I'm not sure if I'm good enough. All those messages that you get are the sort of in-between parts of a narcissistic childhood, which makes, if people are going to come to me and try and get that bit sorted, it becomes a very long and expensive journey. And, you know, I'm still trying to find what to do for these more complex people like narcissistic injury, people with complex trauma. Actually started doing some group work of late so people can learn from each other. They can hear each other's stories and feel less alone. They can give each other the kind of advice you've just given me. But what I'm hearing you do is really fantastic. The fact that you have this podcast. How often does it run? Is it weekly?
It runs every week. And then in my communities, in my Patreon, in my Breakthrough Peace program, there's a monthly exclusive episode that I don't have public.
Right.
It's very important to me, and I don't think healing is possible with narcissistic injury unless we deal with what I call the inner critic.
Right.
Because the nervous system is basically like the response of what is felt as that inner critic. And so when you're raised by a narcissist, I cannot stress how much is critical. I mean, every interaction is a criticism.
Yes.
That's why we struggle with perfectionism so much. That's our inner child going, if I'm just perfect, then nobody will come at me, right? And we have to help our inner child, which is just our inner psychology, you know, our inner understanding. So I talk about cultivating this wise woman or this wise man that takes care of the inner child. You know, so I have needed my wise woman to step in and learn to listen. This is what mindfulness is for, to that critical voice that says, oh, like, it's not just you look ugly today. It's not that kind of on the nose criticism. That's there too, but it's more like, oh, is that what you're going to wear today? It doesn't sound mean, but it's that slight undermining of you being able to confidently be yourself. And it starts as somebody else's voice. And then over the years, it just sort of creeps in and it becomes our own. And we have to separate from that. We can't let that, I say, we can't let that critical part drive the bus of our life. It's going to take us to some really shitty places. We have to cultivate this wise woman to say, hey, I know you're trying to help me, but it's not very helpful. I need you to step back from the driver's seat and get more in the back seat. We have to learn how to identify that because it's so normalized to us, we don't even hear it. And I teach peace and boundaries because that's foundational. And because in those boundaries I teach every October, I'm going to teach it this October, I didn't last. That's like a college classroom space where people can ask me questions. But the things that I teach in there towards boundaries are almost never taught when it comes to boundaries. Like I teach managing our expectations. We wind up with inner perfectionists from having the narcissistic influence. So if we go into boundaries work with our expectations still too high, we're going to think we can use boundaries to get everything exactly right. Well, that's wrong out of the gate. So we have to also practice good enough principle that nothing will be perfect, not me, not anybody else. And that's right. And it's okay. We have to stop that incessant, it's never good enough, that was sort of implanted into us. We have to eradicate that from our systems. And it takes a lot to pay attention to work with. It also takes support. You start having boundaries with difficult people, they don't go, oh, good for you, you're acting in self-respect. They see that, they feel that, and they go, oh, I'm going to try even harder to get past your boundaries now. And they're good at it. And we have buttons that they know how to push. So we have to figure out how to disable those buttons too. And that's not work that can be done in 3, 4, 5 sessions. That is work that has to be done meeting yourself and again and again and again, and having other people in your life, professionally, maybe even personally, who go, hey, you're not being nice to yourself right now. Do you hear that? because we don't even hear it. It's so normalized to us. So yes, healing is possible, but it takes the whole pie. It is not one slice of pie. It is everything, every interaction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The whole pie. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've certainly learned a lot myself, and I'm really appreciating the perspective that you have and the hard work that you put into it, and the clarity that you've got, and the healing that you've got for yourself over all these years, and the fact that you're out there in the world helping others, by really showing them a different way to heal themselves. So is it okay for me to let people know how to get hold of you on the podcast and so on?
Absolutely, absolutely. The easiest way is probably emotionalbadass.com. It's way
Okay.
easier to spell than my name. So yeah, you can come listen. If you want more from me, there's a myriad of ways. Just kind of dip your toe in and trust your intuition. If you want to do one of my programs, you can find that on the website. Like I am enrolling people in my peace program. We meet twice a month to really troubleshoot what got in the way of your peace. Yeah, and we talk through it like as we go so that people can really learn from each other. And you're exactly right that a group is, even if you're sheepish, like I'm very introverted. I really, really am. But I see the value in putting myself out there. So even super introverted people, that group dynamic is really the essence of being around that fire and sharing wisdom. And when professionals say things, doesn't matter how wise we are or how helpful we are, it matters more to your humanness when a non-professional figures it out with you and in front of you. It's easier for a human being to accept. There's
Yeah.
just some part of our psychology that goes, oh, this professional is just a little bit psychobabble. Like it's just natural. So
Yeah.
a group is a very, very powerful dynamic. So even if you're nervous, even if you're scared, even if you deal with overwhelm, like I'm saying, group work is very, very, very good. But you got to be with a practitioner who knows how to run a group and pull a group together in a
Yeah.
right way. Because I help people heal from master manipulation, from personality disordered people, my sales tactics are not pushy at all either. So that's another thing for sensitive people. We're very resistant to salesmanship. And if I had more salesmanship, I'd probably have more money and all of that, but I don't. So know that if you come into any of my things, it's an easy, natural vibe, and just trust your gut. Timing is everything too. You'll know what resonates with you. And it's a very important thing to me, if this is the healing you're doing, that you learn what it is to trust your gut. That is your compass. And that is what having a personality disordered relationship does. It jacks with your own relationship with your own gut. So to me, healing is coming back to your gut. So if your gut says, no, I don't want anything from Nikki, I want you trusting that till the end of time. If your gut says, I think I do want to spend time with this lady learning what she does, then trust that. Always, not just with my stuff, with everything, trust your gut. And know you're going to get it wrong sometimes. That's how you learn to trust it. Just like a little baby walking. Nobody learns to walk without falling on their little booty. We know that about walking. We need to know that about walking our healing paths too. It's okay if you fall on your little booty, learning how to walk. You're going to get back up again. And eventually you're going to be able to run. But don't quit because you're wobbly. Don't lean away because you're wobbly. It's good to be wobbly. Let yourself wobble. You'll get stronger.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're
I
so
really
welcome.
enjoyed listening. I've learned so much myself, having come from that background.
You're so welcome.
Hearing you talk is just such a pleasure and so interesting. Thank you, Nikki, so much. I'm going to say goodbye and thank you on behalf of my community. It's been absolutely wonderful. I'm quite sure that people are going to be coming to your podcast and contacting you. And just, sitting in your company is just such a pleasure. It's just so lovely. So thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. I feel the same. I feel very blessed to have found you and connected. And I'm so excited to incorporate more of what you do in my work too. So light and love to you and everybody. Thank you.